Hello YouTube! Greetings from the LazyEyebrowReviewer to part 2 of the Combiner Wars Superion review! Last time I covered the deluxe aerial bots. Now it's time to move on to the Voyager-sized figure. And for anyone asking, these reviews won't be covering Power Glide since, for one, I never bothered picking him up, and two, he turns into a rather unconvincing gun in my opinion. Yeah, he's a mini-bot, so he should be small, but I mean, come on, he's modeled after an A10 Thunderbolt, and unless he's a figure scaled after a model A10, that's kinda dumb. Anyway, on to the main attraction, Silverbolt. Silverbolt back in the 80s used to turn into a Concorde. Since the plane was never updated, as well as retired over 13 years ago, not to mention Hashtag's departure from stealing designs to planes willy-nilly without any of the regard given to plane manufacturers as there has been given to car manufacturers, here we have modern Silverbolt styled after what more than likely would be what the Concorde could have possibly looked like today, should it have been still active and updated to meet modern standards. And man, do I love this thing! While not without its flaws, of course, I find this plane is amazing. Through and through, it's totally reminiscent of what Silverbolt is and was. I quite love the orange stripe running down the sides of the plane. I love how it has a second deck, much like you'd find on a 747 for its first class section. I like all the window detail there is. This could have definitely been painted, mind you, and I would have rathered that, but well, I'm sure I'll live. Although Reaper Labels, if I'm not mistaken, had you covered if you really desire that jet commercial airline look. I'm quite a fan of the nose cone. It's rubbery plastic, which isn't my favorite, but it looks good, so yay! The wings are delta-shaped, though not entirely. I think I would have liked a bit more wing coverage here just to help hide the robot kibble while looking at it from the top, but at the same time, it's not really that big of a deal, because I can totally see a Concorde having this sort of wing design should it have been designed today, or if this was a rival aircraft designed to compete with the Concorde. Though speaking of kibble, here he is from the back, and well, here's where things kind of start to fall apart. There's sort of engines there, you can see them, but they're kind of a poor excuse for engines in my opinion. Otherwise, the robot junk is kind of getting in the way of what the plane should be. And that kind of holds true with any other angle you look at it. More so with this figure I find than with the deluxe figures. The landing gear, by the way, I've painted it silver with black tires since it was cast in white, and that was that. Honestly, I love how this looks here, as well as the look it pulls off on Fireflight. I don't know why more figures didn't do this as far as planes go. Even just the front gear alone seems to make this that much better to me, and it's such a small detail that could so be added to so many more figures. And before I forget, pointless dumb rifle port for onboard weapon storage. Can I ask something though? Why is everybody so intent on having weapon storage in vehicle mode? I don't mind something clever like it folding up out of the way or being something like an exhaust port, but when it's junk like this, or this, or this, or even this, I gotta wonder why. Are we all so dang afraid we're going to lose this stuff? I get the child-friendly play value, but reviewers I've seen usually complain that it looks dumb if it has it, and then usually the same people will whine that they have to find some place to store their guns and or accessories somewhere when a figure doesn't need them for whatever mode they're in. Guys, it's okay. Really, there is a solution. Watch. Well, that's the vehicle modes for the aerial bots. I really do love them all. If you can get past the obvious robot junk on the bottom, they're all amazing vehicle modes. Are they in scale with each other? Well, more or less. Silverbolt is definitely smaller than he should be compared to the other four, and of course, none of these are exactly scaled the way they should be if they were all to match up, and yet, at the same time, it's all kinda believable. Heavy emphasis, though, on kinda. Transformation on this figure is fairly simple, and more or less is a process of folding up the plane and unfolding the robot mode. Fold the tail fin to the side, rotate around the entire front of the plane while also flipping up the landing gear, and then fold up the wings. Move the arms out, unfold the legs, and rotate them so that the red bit is facing outwards. Flip out the feet, followed by the heels, and then close the doors over the legs. On the front, fold open the chest. Swing around the head and close the chest back up. And here we have Silverbolt in robot mode. I gotta say they did quite a nice job transposing this guy from both the toy and the old cartoon into this robot we see here today. Like there's barely a shred of evidence that this was once a plane when looking at him head on like this. He's also blocky and chunky in all the right ways, pulling off about any pose you give to him. As for weapons, he comes with Superion's gun that can split into two. The small bit can be used as a small blaster or spun around and used as a shield. This to me looks silly, and I don't use either. The other part can be used as a rifle for Silverbolt, although I don't know if it's just mine, but the peg ended up being really loose in both hands, so he can't even end up using the dang thing, which is sad really. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say, it's disappointing. Although an option can be plugging it into his arm. This works, though I can't say I'm a fan of it. For size comparison, Frankenseeker, Deluxe Fireflight, Classics Optimus, and Generations Orion packs. Articulation features a ball-jointed head for limited up and down and 360-degree movement. A flip-down chest tray to hold his drinks or what have you. Of course, this will need to be flipped back up before takeoff and landing. Shoulders on a stiff ratchet, both in the rotation and outward movement, for an amazingly good reason that we'll get into later. Bicep swivel, friction 90-degree elbows, and no wrist articulation, sadly. And for that matter, no waist articulation either. Hips, though. Hips are on a universal joint for forward and backward movement. Well, there would be backward movement if it weren't for the junk in the back. Outward movement, 180-degree double-jointed knee, and thigh swivel. This makes for some pretty striking poses, such as the pretzel he just became to show off articulation. A knee-sliding, fist-pumping dramatic entrance into a rock show, mourning over the loss of one of their team members, to be greeted by the replacement. He's just as good, okay? Or how about popping Megatron off for killing one of his new friends, Orion? What a jerk! So those are the current Hasbro aerial bots, both in plane and robot mode. I really do think they look good in both modes. They look great as a team and as a squadron of vehicles. I still would have much rather a slingshot in this group, and I still haven't found one due to the terrible Canadian dollar exchange rate and the loveliest of lovely scalpers on eBay. Those people really make my day. They really, really do. So on to my favorite part. The reason why this probably won my heart over, and the reason why we all bought this set. Superion. Start off with Silverbolt. Move the arms up, then in, while also straightening out the elbows. Put the head away, open up the chest, fold down the in-flight tray. Open the leg doors, and put away the feet. On the tail end, plug the chest into the tail of the aircraft. Fold up the antenna of the Superion head, then put the legs back into jet mode. Make sure the leg doors are plugged into the back. Fold over the panels that were attached to the legs, and finally open the hands and knees to reveal combiner ports. And here we have the torso of Superion. There's more to this transformation, namely the limbs, but I have to pause here for a second. This is hands down the best Scramble City torso I have ever seen! The other figures, both in this line and in other lines, have all mainly tried to expand a chest to make a combiner chest, and widen the hips to make things proportionate while sacrificing a ton of playability. But this is such an amazing idea! I mean, take this diagram of a person. The legs and torso of a person mainly make up a rectangle with arms protruding. So in order to make a bigger person, the other Scramble City figures have tried to compensate. But Superion is like, well, the arms are already the width we need, so let's make the legs the chest and put the head up here. This is such an ingenious idea that I've only ever seen once before, and that was a third-party replacement for Follow Cybertron Bruticus. It just really blows me away at how smart this is, and simultaneously blows me away that they didn't reuse this concept for the rest of the figures. Anyway, moving on to the rest of the transformation. The deluxe figures are mainly all the same. You want a leg? Start in vehicle mode and simply move the wings, fins, and cockpit up and out of the way, and flip around the combiner joint. And then add Coxsackie Virus A16. How about an arm? Start in robot mode, spin the head around, put the arms up and out of the way. Popping them off is also an option I would recommend for a better appearance, but I'll leave them on for the duration of the review. Plug the legs into each other, flip out the combiner plug, and lastly, apply hand, foot, and mouth disease. Does it make sense now? Coxsackie Virus A16? That is the inside joke I've been making, by the way. Coxsackie Virus A16 is the cause of hand, foot, and mouth disease. Only one person ever got it. I'll be referring to these things as A16s from now on, so just thought I'd let y'all know. Anyway, plug it all together, and here we have Superion! When I first saw the images for this figure, I did not want him. When I first assembled this thing together, my reaction was, you know, this thing isn't so bad after all. Quickly, that grew to probably my favorite combiner out of all the ones I own, and I own 4 of them. Before I forget, before the internet therefore impales me, yes, you can flip around the legs for a more G1 appearance. And you know what? Color-wise, yeah, I think this looks good as it gives them more of a uniform color, but you know what this also gives them? A serious lack of leg mobility and overall playability. If you're going to display this thing on a shelf and never touch it like some collector that hasn't had coffee with his inner 9-year-old self for quite some time, Sure, go for this. But if you're totally okay casting off this idea, we'll continue this review. Now, word of a lie, I really do love the final effect. The jet modes work great as limbs. They're not ridiculously bulky in weird ways. In fact, they're actually pretty proportionate in terms of how limbs work. Something I wish the rest of the Combiner Wars line did. The cars being the worst offenders for this. I love how neat and tidy the chest ended up being. I don't mind the skinny thighs. In fact, here's a way to help with this. Just take Air Raid and Skydive's gun and plug them into the holes in the sides of the thighs. If the mismatched color thing bothers you, like it does for me, all you gotta do is complain about it in a review, and then make a trade with someone in your comment section who will gladly alleviate both himself and you of your annoyance. Thanks, man. Totally digging the symmetrical legs now. In short, I wholeheartedly love Superion, and Silverbolt is a major reason as to why I do. The limbs are also a big reason because of how slender their alt modes are. He's excellently proportioned. He looks commanding, well put together, and easily up for the biggest of challenges. Now, my only real complaint, and I know I keep harping on it, so forgive me. It's Alpha Bravo. For the most part, this set is, and when it first came out in the 80s, was pretty much symmetrical in terms of style. Unlike the other teams which had mismatched limbs, especially Bruticus and Defensor, this guy was shaped pretty well symmetrical, and Alpha Bravo is kind of sticking out like a sore thumb to me in this regard. Much like he was in Robot and Jet modes. And do you know why this irritates me so much? Short and simple, he's the best arm in the entire series. And I mean that. Okay, so I don't necessarily like the arm cable, but like I said before, that can pop on and off easily. But what makes this guy so great is the animation and playability options. Remember this doofy thing and how it didn't do this? Well, guess what can? See that 5mm hole in the forearm? Well, pretty much any weapon can fit in there for a forearm cannon. Not to mention the dual 5mm ports in helicopter mode are accessible here as well for a dual cannon bicep weapon. Like, the helicopter mold has so much versatility as an arm, and it really ticks me off because I so much want to like him. And guaranteed, Vortex is probably going to be my favorite limb come Bruticus time. But Superion should have Quickslinger. I'd even go as far as to say he deserves a Quickslinger. Repaint or not, it just feels right and natural. For size comparison though, here's Fans Project Menasor, TFC Hercules, Masterpiece Optimus, Apollyon, Frankenseeker, and MPB. Articulation features a swiveling head that doesn't look up or down, sadly. Thanks to the excellently designed combiner plug, we have ratcheted outward shoulders with a swivel and a rotation. Although due to the fact that the plugs are all chest pieces, this ends up giving Superion heads in his armpits. Grody, man. Grody. And because the arm joints are just the robot mode's legs for the deluxe figures, we have double jointed arms and elbow rotation. And the A16s can swivel in their port. They also come with a standard thumb and movement for all the fingers together. Due to Silverbolt's stiff arm ratchets, we get pretty much 270 degrees forward and backward movement of the hips, with pretty much nothing to impede its movement. Outward movement, the combiner plugs allow for knee movement, as well as knee swivel to go along with the thigh swivel. And the feet have the same articulation as the hands. They're hand feet. They do little else. This, though, makes for some amazing posability, especially for that of a combiner figure. I've never seen a combiner pull off an Iron Man stance. This is incredible to me. Remember how I said the knees turn the right way had playability? Well, how about impaling Menasor on Skydive's nose cone? And even more possibilities. So that's been my review for North American Superion, and the figures that make him up. He's easily my favorite combiner, and not because he's cheap. Price rarely has anything to do with my opinion of a figure. If it was, I would have loved Hasbro's Menasor better than this Menasor. I love him because of the figure presented, for the simplicity while pulling off a fantastic look. A look I proudly display beside the likes of third-party Devastator and Menasor. And you know what? I like the height these figures share. In the cartoon, they were all roughly the same height, which made combiner battles that much more interesting. I wouldn't care so much if Devastator could easily just step on all the other combiners, six figures or not. So closing thoughts. I love this figure through and through. I apparently can't say that enough. I started off laughing at it, was told to try it, and it ended up being my favorite combiner. Something that completely caught me off guard because I was not expecting it. It's simple without sacrificing anything. Commanding without the clutter. And just overall is the best thing that's ever come out of 2015 from Hasbro. Through all the greatness though, would I call it a perfect combiner? In a word, No. At least, not yet anyway. This has been the Lazy Eyebrow Reviewer.